Oppenheimer, the film about a man who changed the course of history by leading the development of the atomic bomb, is enjoying global success. But he's also facing criticism for leaving out details about the human cost of developing the weapon.
I don't know if we can be trusted with such a weapon. But we have no choice.
The film largely centres around the Manhattan Project, a covert operation in the Los Alamos desert where scientists and military officials established a secret city to conduct their nuclear tests. The group, New Mexico Downwinders, say locals endured cruelty at the hands of officials and hundreds of people have since died from the effects of radiation. The group says 78 years on, the US government has not fully acknowledged the impact on those people. We're speaking now to Tina Cordova, the founder of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium. Welcome to ABC News. Tina Cordova, the film Oppenheimer has opened to widespread acclaim worldwide, but it must stir very difficult emotions for you and those who live alongside you. Just tell us how you've been affected by those historic events in New Mexico almost 80 years ago.
Well, I think to reflect on that, we first have to realize that there would have been no Manhattan Project without the people of New Mexico. It's the people of New Mexico that went into the uranium mines and mined the uranium that was used by the Manhattan Project to form the fission process. And it was the people of New Mexico that fully supported Los Alamos Labs. We're the people that did all the dirty work. We built the roads and the bridges and the facilities. The women were the domestic help that cooked every meal, cleaned every house, changed every diaper, and we lived as close as 12 miles to the Trinity test site. And no one ever warned us about the dangers of radiation exposure before or after the test. And we've simply been left here alone by the American government to deal with the sacrifice and suffering that we've experienced. I mean, we've been dying ever since. And so it's had horrendous negative health consequences for us that we have dealt with for 78 years with no assistance from our government.
And of course, there was so much secrecy. I mean, so little was known by those people who were closest to what was happening. What are some of the stories? What's the history been there for the community in terms of finding out and having to then deal with those consequences?
Well, first of all, the people who were alive at the time in the towns that were 20 miles away, 30 miles away, 40 miles away, have told me over and over that they thought they were experiencing the end of the world. You can just imagine what it was like to be awoken that early in the morning to this flash of light that was brighter than daylight, and then the blast effects of that. People were knocked out of their beds. They thought that they were experiencing the end of the world. It appeared to them that the sun was rising in the west instead of the east. And I mean, most people told me that they simply dropped to their knees and started praying in Spanish, the prayers that had sustained them all their lives. And like I said, we've essentially been suffering ever since. I'm the fourth generation in my family to have cancer since 1945. My dad died from cancer. Both my grandmothers had cancer. I had two great-grandfathers alive at the time of the test. They had cancer. And now there's a fifth generation in my family. I have a 23-year-old niece that was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in November. And so for us, it's simply been a history of sacrifice and suffering. And we'll never outlive this because the bomb was a plutonium-based bomb, and plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years. A full 10 pounds of plutonium was dispersed across what's called the Tularosa Basin, where they detonated the bomb. And so it's been the legacy for us is exactly that. And obviously that's not at all experienced when you see the Oppenheimer movie.
It's an unimaginable toll. Thank you so much for sharing the story of yourself and your family. You mentioned there the lack of input response from officials, from the government there in the US. What level of support has there been?
Well, for the New Mexico Downwinders, the first people ever exposed to radiation as a result of an atomic bomb, there's been no support. The government set up a fund in 1990 to take care of other downwinders of the Nevada test site. New Mexico was actually downwind of the Nevada test site also through 1963, and we had monitoring stations here that recorded that. But our government has simply looked away from us, and we've never been given any kind of restitution. We've never been provided health care. And so we have to look out for those things by ourselves. And it's been devastating to us in so many ways and has had a very big negative economic impact on us.
How do you feel now with the release of this film? Does it, in essence, re-traumatise people who've been affected?
It's very much re-traumatizing. And I always say that when they came here to establish the Manhattan Project, they literally invaded our lands and our lives. They took full advantage of everything that was here. And then they came back to film the Oppenheimer movie in New Mexico, and it was a complete invasion of our lands and our lives again. And they'll make hundreds of millions of dollars off this film, and I think it's exploitation, because they had every opportunity to add a panel at the end of the film that would simply acknowledge our sacrifice and suffering, and they refused to do so. And so for me, it's exploitation. They're using our lands. They're using our tax incentives. They're taking full advantage of everything they need to produce this movie here, and they're walking away just like the government did 78 years ago.
Cordova there with the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium in the US.